Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to our Digital Middle Eastern FP&A Circle. Today we are going to speak about deploying artificial intelligence and machine learning for our planning, budgeting, and forecasting. This topic is indeed a very hot topic in our FP&A community, and it has attracted almost 500 registrations from 60 different countries. Let me start by walking you through our previous topics we had in Digital Middle Eastern FP&A Circle. Certainly that's not the first meeting you're attending. We had pretty many before, and if you're interested in any of these topics, most of them are available now as recordings. Today is not going to be less interesting than that. We are going to speak tonight about how artificial intelligence and machine learning can enhance our performance. We are going to see how we can use machine learning for forecasting and budgeting using Microsoft case study. Then we'll move on to our next generation forecasting based on Vodafone example. Then we'll shift to leveraging artificial intelligence-based analytics for agile planning and FP&A. And eventually we'll get to practical insights for successful implementation of these technologies. We'll certainly have conclusions, recommendations, and your Q&A session. By the way, you can start asking your questions already now using our questions box in these tools. So don't hesitate to do it. And now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our speakers for the evening. Please join me here on the webcam, and I will start introducing our speakers with you, Vibe. Vibe speaking is CFO for Microsoft in Netherlands. Vibe has held various positions in local, regional, and worldwide finance roles. Vibe, we are happy to have you with us tonight.
My pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward.
Glad to have you. And let me move on to introducing you, Giselda. Giselda Economy is a financial planning transformation senior manager for Vodafone. Giselda has more than 17 years of experience around process audit and improvement, financial management, and business planning. Giselda, thank you for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure being here. Hello, everyone.
Hello again, Giselda, and let me move on to you, Mohammed. Please join us on the camera. Mohammed Zishan Taki is managing partner for FP&A at Hub of Finance Transformation. Mohammed has more than 17 years of well-diversified experience within Asia and Gulf region in multiple industries. We are happy to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Idil. It's my great pleasure to be a part of this.
I'm glad as well. And let me move on to our final speaker for the evening. It will be Andreas Simon. Andreas is Regional Director for Jedox. Andreas has over 25 years of international business development, sales, and technical experience. Andreas, we are happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Olga. Looking forward to a wonderful session.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that as well. And let me walk our audience through the couple of introductory slides. First of all, let me welcome you to our FP&A Trends Group community. It's not only an international FP&A board, but it's also multiple educational resources as well as strategic advisory and research. So you certainly find something that fits you and interests you. What is going to happen tonight? Tonight we can expect 90 minutes webinar. We will have 4 interactive polling questions. We certainly have Q&A sessions, so you already can start asking your questions. Don't hesitate to connect directly with our speakers through LinkedIn. Presentation is already available in handouts, and you will certainly receive a copy and recording of the webinar in several days or so. Please make sure to take part in our brief survey at the end of the session. Your opinion and your feedback is very valuable to us. Before we actually kick off, let me thank our sponsor for the event. Jedox is a modern enterprise performance management. Thank you, Jedox, for making this event possible. Let me start by a bit of philosophical questions to open the whole session. Let me show you several pictures I have generated myself, but with the help of artificial intelligence. These beautiful pictures were created based on Japanese poems in a matter of seconds. So that's already tremendous improvement to the speed of my work. And if you could only see how I draw, and believe me, it is worse than 4-year-old child, you'll see that it's also a tremendous improvement to the quality of my work, which raises a question: if artificial intelligence can help us improve speed and quality so much in image generation, can it do the same or even more for our finance planning? Another question it raises: can it truly replace an artist? Can it truly replace a FP&A professional? These are some of the questions we will cover tonight. We'll certainly speak about how those modern technologies can help us do much better job in finance. And we'll certainly speak about how these changes will affect our FP&A teams. Let's kick off by starting with our first session for tonight related to budgeting and forecasting. And I will start with Vibe speaking about machine learning for forecasting and budgeting, Microsoft case study. Vibe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga, and it's a true pleasure to be here, and I'm always honored and humbled. Quick introduction of the company that I'm working for, and I'm going to share some best practice with you for. Most of you know it, Microsoft. It's roughly a $200 billion company currently, been growing fast over the last few years. We operate at a global scale, or most of the countries in the world, various products, and I think it's interesting to see that our product groups are growing as well, and many of them are now larger than $6 billion. We serve across, enterprise, smaller businesses, governments, and the consumers. And to come to that, and also to understand our business better, in the next slide, you can see a little bit about how we think about the forecasting process. I think for all of us as finance people, we are familiar with the different forecasting process that we have in the different entities. And one thing is for sure, it's always an intense. It's always a long, and it's always a complicated process. And I think an interesting statement to make also is that most of the times the outcomes is different than what you jointly all agreed on. So what you see is that many teams start really weeks in advance on to determine, what the outlook is going to be like. And most of the times it actually gets started before many of the quarter numbers are final yet. Then we may have that information, we go a level up, and you can see in the middle, and it's going to be actually reviewed by management, product teams, and sales teams, because they want to have their views of the products and what they're going to sell. And then ultimately it goes even one level up to the CFO and the management team, let's call it like that. And they're actually going to decide, and I think decide is the critical word here, about what sort of outlook is going to be sent. And I think in the next slide we have a really beautiful view of the challenges that we faced, and most of the companies are facing when you're talking about making outlooks. I think from an accuracy point of view, many of the outlooks at the end have some human bias or judgments in there. I think the time to market, we have all seen, and I've experienced myself in my previous jobs, that we literally spent I would say maybe 4 weeks to 5 weeks on a forecast cycle, not continuously, of course, right? But every time the work was interrupted to start working on that. And I think thirdly, right, is it really the most valuable add for our finance team to spend, so much time on Outlook and budgeting, when most of the times it gets judged, at the end of the cycle, and like I said earlier, very often the outcome is not as accurate as we want it to be. I think one of the really great opportunities that we created with the machine learning that we're going to talk about in a second is about the fact that the people in your teams are able to free up time to do more value add work for your businesses. And I think this is something that is very often overseen. Just if you realize how much time is being spent on the forecast and the work that's being done on creating budget. If you talk about the next slide, if you can go there for a second, please. If you want to go to machine learning, you first have to ask yourself, what are the questions that we want to have answered? What is the majority of the KPIs that my businesses run on? And I don't need to call on this one in specific, but many people often ask me, right, but if you do machine learning, then what are you look at? Well, you need to look at different trends in the market. You need to look at product releases. You need to look at your recurring businesses. You need to look at your existing customer database, the penetration that you want to do in your new customer database. All these kind of things are considerations that we've put into a machine learning tool, of which in the next slide I've built a little screenshot of that. It's not as clear, actually. Maybe at some other point in time I can do a little bit of a demo, but I wanted to show with you how this machine learning in reality looks like, because ultimately what you see here in the top left hand side are a set of 6-7 filters that I can use based upon time span, geography, different customer segment that we want to look at, time period, the way that we do the machine learning, that I can physically select different filters here. And then at the middle part that you can see here with the big blue bar, I can actually choose different ways of how to calculate the forecast. Is it either through business KPIs? Is it based upon deal-based forecast? Is it based upon run rates? And when you make the right selection and you click on go, it probably takes something like, I would say 30 seconds, and it actually comes with an outlook that gives very accurate understanding of where the business will going. And in the next slide you can actually see what we've done and what we have achieved, because building a machine learning forecast is something that really takes a lot of time. Don't think that it is something that you will do overnight and that will happen fast. But I think if you do it, and you can see it on here, we've been able to achieve multiple things. One is, we've been able to have a better forecast accuracy. It went from about 3% accuracy to 1.5% accuracy, which is, I would say 50% increase in efficiency, right? From a 3 weeks time to market for an outlook, which in some cases is longer, as I said earlier, we're actually going to a 30-minute time to market. To be really honest, it takes a little bit more, right? And you do need some meetings, but by far not as much as in the end. And I think also one important thing to know when you consider machine learning outlook, there's always human interaction needed. I mean, many of the things the machine learning cannot comprehend yet. For example, some of the geopolitical situations that we currently have in the world, if you're going to use machine learning, you still need to make a judgment on that. But I think ultimately it's really, really helping us a lot to be more efficient, but also I think equally important to be more accurate. So if we go to the last slide of the presentation that I have, you can actually see a couple of the things that I would ask you to consider and also be willing to incorporate if you think about machine learning. First of all, it needs to have a tone from the top. Stakeholder buy-in is essential, as it says on this slide. I mean, for example, at Microsoft, it started with the vision of Amy Hood, our CFO, worldwide CFO, who really wanted to modernize the finance in Microsoft and make it more efficient, with the end goal to be more predictable, accurate, have a higher compliance, but also use the finance resources for more value-add work. Another point really to consider is to think about to try, fail, and learn. When we did this machine learning outlook process for the first few years, we actually kept the field forecast as we always had done it. But then in parallel, we actually used a machine learning forecast. And what we did, every time we saw that the machine learning was going to be more accurate. And at a certain point, we felt it was more accurate and to a level that we found acceptable, we start sharing it with the business leaders as well. And with that time, running it in parallel for a couple of quarters, we actually had them convinced that they didn't have to spend as much time on the outlook and the budget as they did in the past, but actually were using the machine learning, and actually they had time back to go back to their customers and partners. And ultimately, that is what it's all about. And then the last point that I want to make, it always remains some human input. And the last bullet here said partnership with finance and data scientists is needed. Of course, right? We need to give the first inputs to our data scientists and programmers to make the machine learning. But even once that is completed, I think human interaction, human value will always super important when you finally submit your outlook. I think what we're trying to save with this is we're filtering out a lot of extra layers of work, and with that also a lot of bias and potential judgment. Ultimately, it led for us to be a more accurate forecast and for finance to free up a lot of resources to work on other deals. So this is kind of like what I wanted to share with you, and happy to give it back to you, Olga.
Thank you so much, Vibe, for such an inspirational presentation. I've actually found myself nodding all the time, even though I wasn't on the camera. Thank you for that. And it's indeed an example of tremendous improvement in speed and quality of work. Accuracy has improved from 3 to 1.5%, and speed from 3 weeks to 30 minutes, which is, I have to say that the starting numbers were quite good, and we're certainly above average. What I would expect. So it's tremendous that even starting with quite good numbers already, you managed to improve them as well. If you have questions to Vibe, don't hesitate to ask him through Q&A box. And now it's time for me to ask our audience a question. But I really want to know, I want to have kind of an inside look into your teams and see how your team size has changed after introducing machine learning or artificial intelligence tools. Your team size has increased, it has decreased, or it hasn't changed. So for all of you who have introduced at least bits of artificial intelligence, machine learning technology, please share with us. Has your team size increased, decreased, or has not changed? I see that many people are already voting, and obviously this question is not for everyone. Many of us are still just considering using these technologies. So let me eventually close this poll and see how we ended. But actually we see in our results that for most of us, team size hasn't changed. 48% have stated so. For 34%, team has decreased, and 18% noticed increase in their teams. Vibe, a quick question to you. How do you feel about those results? Is it surprising?
Well, it's actually on the one hand, it's surprising, and on the other hand, let me try to put things in perspective. I think when most of the time when you talk with finance people about automating things, whether it's forecast, budget, or other work, most of the times they think about it will reduce, so decrease the headcount. I think it hasn't changed, or the increase here is something more that I'm thinking about. And also when you look to our organization in Microsoft, because I've said it now a couple of times, I think Outlook should not be the main goal of your finance department. I think adding value to your business partners and making an impact on the business that you drive, that should be how you should be looking at your finance department and in your FP&A team. So, I think it's good to see that still over half here, has either not changed or increased. And, I would encourage all of us to take away the myth that, automation would actually reduce to a headcount in the finance teams.
Thank you for demystifying that. I think it's very important for all of us to understand that it's not leading to headcount decrease as such. Thank you for that, Vibe, and let us move to the short discussion we can all have together. So please, our other panelists, join us here as well. And what I want to discuss with you is actually quite related to our polling question: how to work with our FP&A team skill set after introducing artificial intelligence and machine learning. And let me start with you, Giselda. What do you think, how we can improve our FP&A team skill set?
Absolutely. So as you said, Olga, it's very important to acknowledge the upskilling need of the finance teams when it comes to the understanding of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and especially the insight that we can get from data. So we need to create the capability within our finance teams to actually become data savvy, because that is what the future upholds.
Great. Let me move on to you, Muhammad. What do you think? How we can work with our FP&A team skill set?
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with all the words you already mentioned. I believe, of course, AI and ML are not going to replace anything, but of course, they are the enabler that can enable the business functions to make better business decisions. So, of course, the FP&A team should act as a business partner by leveraging these AI and ML. Just in the skill set, they should know how to leverage the functionalities of these new emerging technologies to make the best out of it. So that's what I believe it should be in this case.
Thank you, Muhammad. And let me to move on to you, Andres. What is your thinking? How should we work with our FP&A team skill set?
As an experience from our projects, it's very important that the team, the FP&A team, understands what is in that black box. We already heard that in the presentation. That is a lot of people think that is a black box and don't understand where the numbers are coming from. So I think being a master of statistical methods, etc., would be important. In addition to that, it's also interesting that people who were the data collectors or the data reconciliation team before, which is now obsolete, need to find their place in the team and become, would say, the business partner or more the part of the management, helping to understand what the data mean.
Indeed. Thank you for that, for mentioning this shift. Vibe, back to you. Is there still anything to add? How we can improve our FP&A team skill set?
No, I don't think it's anything to add, right? It's actually adding to Andrea's last comment, right? I think it changes the role of the FP&A team, right? So I think the business partnership, the storytelling, and being able to have decisions taken on data is something that is going to grow when we're going to introduce IA and machine learning to the FP&A teams, right? So it's truly a different skill set. That is what we need to focus on.
Thank you. Thank you guys for all of your answers, and let us move on. Second presentation of the evening will be presented by Giselda Economy. Giselda will be speaking about next generation forecasting using Vodafone case study. Giselda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga. And again, it's great to be here, and hopefully the story that I will share for the journey that we have been through with next generation forecasting will be helpful also for the other companies and colleagues that are here today. So as per my introduction, I currently work in the financial planning transformation team, and we had been tasked in order to explore and implement and I guess support the company in adopting machine learning. And some of the common challenges, I'm going to mention them here just for the sake of it, but is nothing to add to what Vibe just shared before, is we went through around in our operating companies, and we saw that from time to time, we did have low level of financial modeling automation in financial forecasting, and mostly the process was dominated by Excel. The second common challenge was that there was limited use of predictive analytics and machine learning, mainly underpinned by the lack of trust and the understanding of the output of machine learning. And the third is that from line item to line item, from revenue to cost, sometimes we found that in the RF process, in the rolling forecast process in place, the commercial planning was not always fully integrated with the financial planning. And from the chart, as you can see, from a bottom-up approach, it makes it obviously a bit more challenging and time-consuming to be able to deliver the forecast on a fair time to market. When we move to our next slide, I actually want to show you that we step back and try to understand what are the desired outcomes that we would want this project to deliver. So we went through a round robin, and then we understood that, yeah, streamlined and improved financial forecasting needed to be in place in order to be at pace with the times changing. The finance team wanted to be agile in their capability to manage risks and grasp opportunities. And most and foremost, they wanted to actually get actionable insight, which enabled growth and also alignment on the strategic objective. So we looked around and more or less we agreed that machine learning and artificial intelligence is the only remaining capability that can aggregate and process data with far much more greater speed and accuracy. And obviously we could scale the solution in the rest of the local market. So the approach that we actually took, I'm going to share you in the next slide, is a product development approach. So we reached out to our FP&A community throughout the globe, and we tried to understand what are the top 5 themes in terms of feedback that they wanted or were expecting out of the ML solution. The first one introduced the concept of explainable AI. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but it's very much, talking around how we need to manage the expectation around the understanding of machine learning and its output, and also avoid, I think, the perception that machine learning is a black box. The second one is accuracy of machine learning versus human forecast. Obviously, it is key in this journey to acknowledge that at some point we have to look at machine learning and always compare that of the accuracy of that with humans. And that is key in order for us to make sure that we are delivering value. In a world of uncertainty, I think as Vibe mentioned, the expectations of the FP&A function actually change is to look beyond the past and also to look beyond what the historical numbers can tell us. And this is where we introduce the concept of scenario-based planning. The fourth and the 5 are very much around the same themes. So how can we create actionable insight through data modeling and visualization? And how, in the meantime, we can create more independence of the FP&A team to train and run the machine learning models. So in the next slide, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of how we actually brought all of these ideas to life. You can see that in this, we have 2 main pillars of our solution, the part which is automation and the other one which is human input. And in this, we have acknowledged that it is very important for these 2 pieces to kind of work as gizmos together to bring this to life. So when it comes to automation, it was very clear from our feedback and research that we had to implement a driver-based solution, and we call that a P times Q solution. We had to also acknowledge the methodology in which we plan and understand our business, our telecom business, which is the inflow-based retention and outflow methodology. And equally through that automation, we had to deliver machine learning capabilities. The human input becomes very much important, especially when it comes to what-if analysis or the application of management judgments. As Vibe said, there is a need to actually acknowledge what are those overlays for the purpose of target setting. But the key piece, which for me is a real success as an innovation in the implementation of machine learning, is our ability to incorporate external events. We call them in machine learning exogenous regressors, and it's very much acknowledging what are those material disruptive events which are included in historical past that we can use in order to model the future. In the next slide, I will be sharing with you how we decided to start our journey. So this is quite an innovative project, and we wanted to make sure that we are winning the heart of our stakeholders. So we decided to start small. We took a particular line of our consumer mobile revenue, which was of a significant materiality in order to prove value, and also that had high customer volumes. As I will be making the point later, data points, so data granularity and completeness is very important. And also we wanted to demonstrate value by understanding which are the external events and how these can be incorporated in the modeling of the future. Some of the external events, in order for me to give you a flavor, are inflation indexation, promotions, tariff changes, competitor movements, holidays calendars, or other very much disruptive events such as our COVID pandemic, war, and natural disasters. We were able to prove through our minimum viable product that we could process millions of data in a very short amount of time through the power of technology. We were able to use our external events in order to model the future, up to 8 quarters of forecast, which were very much mirroring the ability of humans and the business life cycles of the human forecast. We were able in very few seconds to create multiple models and outcomes, some of them that were created automatically by the tool in order to outline the business inertia. And also we were able within the tool to provide the capability of the human or professional judgment to be overlaid as part of the rolling forecast or target setting exercise. We were able to do this with very high levels of accuracy, and what we have decided internally is very much the same approach as Microsoft, to be able to run this in parallel and to win the trust of our stakeholders, and then eventually to exchange or to replace the current process. In my final slide is a collection of the key learnings and the conclusions that I would want you to take away out of the journey that Vodafone has embarked. I use an acronym of MACHINE, and hopefully this is what sticks with you after we finish this session together. So the M stands for modeling of data. I think when we started the journey, we thought that, well, everything needs to be forecasted. But once we understood the real drivers of the forecast, acknowledging which part of that forecast can be modeled and which one can be forecasted, it is very important to really speak the same language as your FP&A or finance decision support community is speaking. There is only one way for us to be able to accelerate in this agenda, and is through living a spirit of experimenting and learning fast. The other point, which is very near to my heart, is about how to acknowledge how disruptive this technology can be, not in terms of also processes, but also the culture of performing financial forecasting in a company. And therefore, it's very important to acknowledge that with the implementation of machine learning, there is always a certain level of change which needs to be managed, and a process which needs to be continuously transformed. Humans, very important, not only in terms of making the right hypothesis to support the machine learning modeling, not only to have the right support, but always to acknowledge that the reality of machine learning is always a confined reality that will be controlled by humans. And therefore, having then that hands holding along in understanding machine learning is very important. It's absolutely a long journey. So we've just started. We're very positive and about the results, and we're looking forward to just continue scaling the solution up, but it's absolutely a marathon and not a sprint. Data quality and granularity is very important. I don't know if you captured from the Microsoft example, the 10-year plus of revenue data. The more data, the better it is in order for us to predict, especially like trending and seasonality and so forth. And the final one is educating your users and upskilling your finance team. This is the solution that is very much pertaining to the future. So acknowledging the journey in terms of knowledge and development that different teams in the local markets and in the finance team would need to go through is very important to be able to support them and ensure that they remain relevant for the time being. So that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Giselda, for your presentations. Thank you for bringing in this human element. My personal quest of answering the question whether artificial intelligence can replace humans here in FP&A forecasting. It's very clear that hardly it can replace our teams. It's indeed about cooperation, about human input and machine learning input. Thank you again for mentioning the need to win hearts of our stakeholders. That's exactly what my next polling question is connected to. So it's time again for me to ask our audience a polling question, and this time it's related about our company leadership attitude to machine learning based forecasts. So we want to know whether your company leadership rejects it, is very skeptical about it, curious about it, or embraces it. So this is a whole spectrum of different feelings about machine learning based forecasts. Are we rejecting it? Are we skeptical about it? Are we curious about it, or we are embracing it? Let's see what our audience has to say. It's certainly different by different type of organization, by different industry, certainly related to the digital savviness of our leadership. So do we reject it? Are we skeptical? Are we curious? Or we embrace it? Most of you have already voted. So let me close this poll and let me share the results with you. So what do we see here? That absolute majority is curious about it. It's over the half of our attendees. 25% are very skeptical, 16% embrace it, and only 5% reject it. Geselde, what do you think? Is this in line with your expectations?
I'm absolutely thrilled to see that there is a higher curiosity around machine learning, and I would have loved for more people to embrace it, because sponsorship in getting something done around machine learning implementation is very important. But I think that for the time being, and my awareness of different industries, this sort of represents what is out there.
Nice, nice. So let's hope that more and more people will embrace it in future. And it's time for us to have a short discussion actually on a related topic, how to make machine learning based forecasts more transparent and understandable, and therefore reduce this skepticism. So please, all of you, join me here on the webcam. And let's start this question with you, Muhammad. What do you think? How to make our forecasts more transparent?
Yeah, I think as the last polling question mentioned, like most of the people are either curious or skeptical about it. So of course, our approach, as we have implemented AI and ML in many organizations. So of course, we always start with the proof of concept. So we always try to identify the business problems. What are the business problems? What are their strategic issues? What is the number one anxiety in the business? And then we try to solve those problems through these emerging technologies like AI and ML. So it makes for the business or non-finance people, it makes it more easy to understand, and also it's more transparent, because of course they're not going to learn about all the back-end algorithms or the mechanics of the technology. So we have to, I think, to make it more transparent, in short, we have to correlate with the business problems and make it as a proof of concept for them.
Thank you for this answer. And let me move on to our technology expert. Andreas, what do you think? What we can do in this area?
I think we already talked about that we have to upskill our team in terms of storytelling, because the storytelling is something very important, comes with the AI, and the more technology you're using, the more important the storytelling is to make it transparent and understandable. But also that people understand what is behind the black box and what is coming out of that. And a last point would be that we all heard that from Vibe that running the AI machine learning forecast next to a manual forecast for a little bit of time makes, I would say, things more understandable and more believable at the end.
Well, that certainly makes sense. And let me turn on to you, Vibe. What do you think? How we can make our machine learning based forecasts more transparent?
Well, I don't know, right? Because Andres and I have never met until 30 minutes ago. But he's stealing my thunder because those were, I think, the points that I want to bring up as well. I think probably the last point that I want to add to it, right, which does not necessarily make it more transparent or understandable, but I do think that the tone from the top is going to play a really big role in accepting and being able to work with machine learn based forecasting, because if people hear it from the leaders in the company that they believe in it, and you're able to back that up with the parallel processes that you run and the storytelling that you add to it, I think that makes the whole picture complete then, right? And then there is very little, let's say, openings for people at certain point in time to challenge you, because once you start this journey, that's the first thing that you will receive, and that is resistance, right? Because people struggle with changes sometimes. Anyway, so that's how I think about it.
Thank you for this thought. And back to you, Giselda. What do you think? How we can make some efforts, at least some efforts in this area?
So how we have approached it in Vodafone is to acknowledge AP times Q, so driver-based planning, and therefore there is a level of modeling within the ability to forecast for certain lines. What I can acknowledge is that it's very different for you to have a conversation with your stakeholders when you're explaining how your drivers respond to seasonality and trending, while versus just a P&L line which is moving in a particular direction. So that's for now our conversation in Vodafone.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for all of your answers, and thank you for bringing in this insight, interpretation, and storytelling skills. Again, stressing human cooperation with modern technology. Let us move on and let us get to another example, or even series of examples coming from agile planning area. That's where Muhammad is going to speak about leveraging artificial intelligence-based analytics for agile planning and FP&A. Muhammad, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Lena. So as Vibe and Gazelle already presented about the accuracy, improving the accuracy of forecast and our prediction using ML and AI. So I would like to start with a problem that, as you can see, according to the survey done across the Middle East and other regions, that $242 billion annually is lost due to forecasting error only. And as you can see, it has a knock-on impact because it is affecting our materials buffer, then it's affecting your finished inventory, it's affecting your, you can say, excess or other inventory on hand, and then ultimately it has an impact on the sales. So 2.5% of the sales, as you can see, it's lost because of the forecasting error. So despite being $500 billion being spent on our legacy systems like our ERP or demand planning system, there's a huge amount of loss that is being occurred because of the inaccuracy of the forecast. And as Vibe and Gazelle already gave you a practical example of Microsoft and Vodafone, how it helped to improve the accuracy of the forecast. So I would like to share with you some different flavors just to give you some more understanding of how you can maximize the ROI on your implementation of this project, because being a finance professional, we always go for the ROI, right? Like what will be our return on investment if since we have implemented AI in multiple industries. So I would like to share with you some of the examples. As you can see on your screen, the use case number 1 that I'm going to share with you, it's about the forecasting error. So it was a $700 million CPG manufacturer. Their aim was to improve the accuracy by 80% or from 65%. But when we implemented AI, as Vibe already mentioned this thing, using ML and algorithms, it has significantly improved the accuracy of the forecasting to reduce the forecasting error. As you can see in the maroon bar, even it exceeds the expectations. So this is, of course, one of the major impact. As we can see, if there is an error in the forecast, it has a knock-on impact on other areas of the business. If we move to the next slide, we can see another example. This is also very important in the finance, like the quality of the revenue. Because if we are analyzing the revenue month over month or year over year or actual versus budget, we are not going into deep dive. What is the quality of that revenue? Because if you are, for example, if you can take this example of $1 billion high-tech manufacturer, they were having issues with the quality and the propensity of the deals to close. So using AI and machine learning, by going deep dive into their sales cycle, we divided their revenue into three main categories, as you can see on your left-hand side, into three different buckets. That's the low propensity to close, mid propensity, and high propensity to close. So there is a high chance that the salesman or the resources of the company might be, you can say, spend or utilize in those deals which are having low propensity to close, right? And you need to discount those. So if you are offering discounts, it costs to the company, right? It affects your bottom line and ultimately the profitability of the company. So that's mean even if the revenue is coming, the quality of revenue is not that high that impact your net profit or the profitability of the organization. So using machine learning and AI, we can go into deep dive into the sales pipeline and identify all these based on the past data and the trends and the volatility, and we can significantly improve the quality of the revenue. So this is another great example of how we can improve the quality of the revenue. So if we move to the another slide, we can see some another example, and this is really very pertinent in current times. As we all know that because of the COVID-19 pandemic and then Russia-Ukraine war, there were lots of supply chain constraints, right? Lots of disruptions in the supply chain. So here also AI and machine learning models can help you to maximize the billing. Billing in the sense is your revenue. It can help to maximize the billing in the supply chain constraint. So many people, they think that it's an optimization problem. You have to optimize your inventory, but personally, I believe that it's not an optimization problem, it's a maximization problem. How you can maximize your revenue using AI and machine learning models. So as you can see on your screen on the left-hand side, when we divided and we applied these algorithms into the inventory, we identified that only by increasing 30% of the combination of raw materials that they were using, they can increase their revenue 4x time, from 7 million to 40 million from the first segment on the left quantile, as you can see, combination of these products. So this all again, it's connected with the external factors as well, the demand for those factors, because AI can also take into account all the externalities, all the external factors affecting your business. So it helps us also here to make the better business decisions to maximize the revenue based on the supply chain constraints. So if you are in short of any parts or spare parts or any raw material for the finished goods, you can use these models from artificial intelligence and machine learning to basically maximize your billing in times of supply chain constraints. So this 4 billion high-tech hardware manufacturer, it helped them a lot to maximize. As you can see, it helped them to maximize their revenue by 4x times. So that's a significant value addition from the AI. Again, if we can move to another slide, you can see another example. This is very pertinent for the FP&A financial planning analysis, because we all know we are doing lots of variance analysis, and in a traditional FP&A terms, what we call as a favorable or unfavorable variance, right? So as you can see on your screen in the green bar, these are those trends which are showing in the red color means unfavorable variance. So all of the managers, all the resources of the company, immediately they focus all their resources. Okay, this is the bad trend. We have to fix it. We have to fix it. And then all of their attention is only on fixing these bad trends. But the AI prediction and the AI predicted trend or algorithms, they also identify those good trends which are expected to turn bad. Means at the time, as you can see, for example, in the red color, as you can see, all these dry storage and these preparation, these are all good trends. These are showing favorable variance. So as per the traditional FP&A, it should be treated as a positive sign, but they are expected to turn bad. And that's where AI-based analytics, it helps us to identify that 18 million US dollar is going to loss because of these trends which are going to turn bad. So in that, if you can see, it was at the outside, it was showing like 10 million we have fixed. We have saved this 10 million, but in fact, we are losing 8 million because if without using AI, we cannot identify unseen good trends which are expected to turn bad. So here again, you can see another power of AI and prediction. So if we can move to the last case study, another very great example of the analytics scorecard using AI is 460 million CPG manufacturer. They were trying to maximize their inventory, optimize their inventory, as you can see, and using Monte Carlo simulation, using min-max and inventory on hand. So this is basically the optimization of the working capital in the first and second row. In the third row, they have SLA, service level agreement. And if you violate service level agreement, there are fines. So you can avoid those fines also using these algorithms. And by combining Monte Carlo simulation, algorithms, AI, you can also help to increase the sales using your supply chain disconnections or your demand in the market. So it also helps to add significant value to the business. So if you can just go to the last slide in the summary, as we can see, of course, lots of value addition can be helped. As also Vibe already mentioned, that analytics helps to reduce the human bias, because whenever we thought if people are involved from different departments, always there is a human bias in the prediction and the forecast. So of course, AI helps significantly to reduce the human bias. It can mitigate the losses that can occur from the analytics. Of course, it's a heavy lift. You need to hire different technicians, but of course, AI has such capability where it can do all of these, more of these calculations automatically. That can help you in increasing your demand forecasting, your inventory, your supply chain operations, etc. So this is in a nutshell how we can just, the objective of this case study is to show you how you can fully leverage and maximize your ROI using AI technology. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Muhammad, for such a nice presentation and bringing in many examples from various industries showing that machine learning-based forecasts are actually much more accurate than those we can create manually. It's time for me to ask our audience another question. By the way, if you want to ask Muhammad or any other panelists question, it's a good time to do so. Use a question box here, and meanwhile let's move on to the next polling question. What I'm actually very curious to know now is in which areas of FP&A you think that machine learning or artificial intelligence can bring more benefit, or where do you use it? These are classical areas of budgeting and forecasting, scenario planning, business analysis. So let's see how your votes will be split in that. Is it classical budgeting and forecasting? Is it scenario planning? Is it business analysis? I'm really curious to see the results. And obviously, some areas are probably easier to start with than others, but let's see how we actually maximize the potential of machine learning or artificial intelligence in finance. Let's wait for some more people to vote before we can close this poll. And actually, I can't wait to see the results. Okay, let me close the results and share them with you. What do we see here? We see that absolute majority, but it's actually not that much. And second option, 42% are using these technologies in budgeting and forecasting, 31% in scenario planning, and 27% in business analysis. Muhammad, what do you think? Is it in line with your expectations?
Yeah, I think it is in line perfectly, as we already mentioned in our, I think all of the presenters, as they presented, that it's mainly used in the budgeting and forecasting, because I think the rate of error and the losses that is being caused because of the inaccuracy of forecast is so significant and so substantial that, of course, that's why I believe it should be used. But yeah, of course, we can use it in scenario planning, because it can be used for your modeling different scenarios. So yeah, I believe it is in line with that.
Certainly makes sense, and it's actually very closely connected to our upcoming discussion, which I want to obviously have with all of you, with all of our panelists. And the question is, which areas of FP&A can benefit most from implementing artificial intelligence and machine learning? And let me this time start with you, Andreas. What do you think? Which areas can benefit the most?
So I would say the biggest impact at the moment, what we see in the AI and ML projects, are in the forecasting and planning areas, budgeting. and especially in the preparation of that, in the data reconciliation, in finding data patterns inside actual data, getting the outliers correct, etc. So these two areas are mostly what we see in the projects.
Certainly makes sense. Let me move on to you, Vibe. What do you think? Which areas can benefit the most?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mean answer, right? Because I think they can all benefit from it in their own different perspective. And, I do think that, like Andreas said, I think the budgeting and forecasting is the one where you can probably have the quickest and the most visible impact. While I think to what Mohamed just said, right? I think from a dollar perspective, I think there's way different scenarios like, planning scenarios that could actually bring you more dollars. So I think as an FP&A leader, you need to make the wise choice, where you can make the most impact and gain credibility, and maybe take a step back and then go to the ones that gives you the more dollars. Is not probably what you tend to use to hear from a CFO, right? Because he always wants to go for the dollars. But I think we also have to be realistic, right? That we work with humans, and we need to create ourselves a path that in the long run we have the maximum impact.
Indeed, indeed. Let's move on to Giselda. What do you think? Where we can benefit the most?
Well, I would agree with Vibe because all of those three activities are complementary to each other, and therefore a scenario-based planning is sort of the fundamentals of any budgeting and forecasting process. I think perhaps something that I can leave you with is that whatever technology or machine learning solution you implement throughout those three main pillars of financial forecasting, just make sure that there is some sort of consistency in the application of that technology. You don't want to be in a position of completely confusing your audience by having different results across different pillars of that activity. So perhaps that is something to be mindful of.
That is certainly a valid point. And back to you, Mohamed. Do you have anything to add after you had all the answers?
Yeah, I think completely I'm aligned with what Vibe and Giselle said. It all depends, first of all, obviously, upon the organization. And of course, all of these areas are complementary. And of course, as I already mentioned, that we can use modeling or AI-based modeling for our scenario planning as well. So yeah, I think all of these areas can be leveraged.
Perfect. Certainly makes sense. And now it's time for us to move on to the last session of the evening. We have had several convincing presentations on why is it important and how more accurate machine learning forecasts can be. But now let's speak about implementation. And that is when Andreas Simon will be speaking about practical insights for successful implementation of these modern technologies. Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga, and thanks very much for inviting me to that event. I would like to give a little bit of a view on how we are implementing AI projects or machine learning projects across our customer base. So when we are talking about modern EPM platforms supporting the entire journey to digitalization, we think that all our customers are in a kind of, or we put a maturity model on most of them. So what a maturity model means that they have in our maturity model, we have 3 different steps to make it as easy as possible. So the green step is automation, and integration means that a lot of our customers are still using Excel as a foundation of their budgeting and planning process, which gets with the time a little bit complicated to be fast and agile in this world, and with the macroeconomics and the situation we are in, like pandemics, wars, etc. So the automation and integration is one thing what they would like to solve first. So they want to get their spreadsheet chaos under control and increase their efficiency. When this step is done, normally they have the perfect platform to combine different planning areas seamlessly to collaborate across the business. Means that's not only anymore the Office of Finance, which talks about budgeting, planning, forecasting. It's also about the operations. Sales, HR, marketing, IT, sales and operations, etc. They all want to be part of the planning and forecasting process. So What we are doing then in the blue area is that we want to collaborate across business partnering, FP&A, that the new term from Gartner, etc. All of that is happening in that area. And then when it comes to a higher level, is that when we want to transform planning to create new value, we want to migrate from a manual forecasting to a driver-based automated planning, because we want to respond fast and augment decision making. And then it's a moment where AI and machine learning come into place. Where you want to start is normally a little bit depending on your situation you have and what you want to do. But keep in mind, and we already heard that from Giselda, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's all about the journey to digitalization. So when we go to the next slide, we see that transform planning to create new value is if we want to increase forecast speed and accuracy, because we don't want to be 3 weeks in the planning and forecasting process. We want to be perhaps forecasting numbers every hour. So we have customers who want to do a forecast, an update about their numbers every hour, sometimes every day, and then a 3-week forecasting process is far too long. And at the same time, we want to free up resources with automated continuous forecasting. Means that we want to give value to the customer. Means that we want to make sure that the tasks like data collection, data reconciliation, etc., will be done by the machine and not anymore by human beings, and that the human beings are more focusing on business partnering, storytelling, insight into the data, etc. When we go to the next slide, how we want to achieve that is a project in AI starts, it's a little bit different between new and existing customers. With new customers, normally we always are in a POC, a proof of concept. So that means when we are in a POC that we want to test data before we are going into a real project, because we don't know if the amount of data which is available, if the quality of the data which is available is right and it's okay for an AI machine learning process. So when you go into a POC, you test approach on sample data, for example, a single region. Then you go into the evaluation of the POC, you do a scoping and create the effort estimation before you do the project kickoff. While when you have existing customers, normally, because we have done the integration with the data already, we know exactly the data quality and we know exactly where the data is coming from. So most of the time, this step of a POC is not really necessary anymore. What I'm saying here is not really true, because a lot of existing customers still requiring a POC and want to find out if what we are doing in the project has some sense. Then when we are going to AI project, we have a phase 1 and phase 2. And when we go to the next slide, we will see a little bit about what does it mean, AI phase 1. The phase 1 in the step 1 to 3 is the data analysis and the design, while in AI phase 2, that's about the implementation. This is step 4 to 6. So when we go in the next slide, we see step 1, data modeling and specification, is that data needs to be made available to the AI team. That means we need to have access to all the data. And we most of the time say that data need to be, at least when we are going into when we want to have a good accuracy, then we mostly need an amount of 3 years of actual data when we want to go into an AI project. So that data need to be made available. We will need to find outliers. We need to find the data patterns, etc. So we want to have a specification of what exactly needs to be predicted. So what kind of measures we want to predict, periods, etc. And we kick off with customer data experts to analyze which data is available, like I said, and which data is needed to reach the specification goals. When we go to the next slide, we go to data analysis. So the data is available in regard to the prediction goals. Missing values need to be evaluated. We need to group data. We need to have a look at new and outdated data. And we kick off with customer and data experts to analyze if data decision is valid. And the next slide, what we see is that the design decision after the data, we know that the data is available, etc. Then we have to test available data with different approaches, because do we want to have a time series prediction? Do we have a driver-based approach? Do we decide which approach, then decide which approach to take for the specified data sets depending on first results? Possibly reiteration if data sources are not sufficient. So we are doing things more and more to make sure that at the end we have sufficient data sources. And then milestones, the decision with which prediction model should be used in the implementation phase. Then we go to the AI design phase 2. When we look at the next slide, then the step number 4 means we have the design implementation, means using specified approach on all the available data sets and adapt parameters, etc. We have adapt approaches to different data scenarios to reach maximum accuracy for each data set. So some of our customers are super happy with a 70% accuracy rate because they had a 50% before. Some of the customers need to have a 90% accuracy rate, otherwise they don't think that it's valuable. So that design implementation need to happen in that step. When we go into the next slide, we see in the step 5 that we test and refine the approaches in different scenarios and then refine approach to reach optimal output, which means, again, reiteration, possible reiteration if data sources or prediction models are not sufficient. That is what we have to do in test and define, user acceptance tests, etc., everything what is happening there. And then we go to the last step, and that is happening on the next slide, which is about the production. We apply the results to production level, put it into production, then of course train all the people and make sure that the people understand how they can use the design and the wizards inside the application, and then the data experts, how they can use the engine to create more statistical methods if they want to have that in the future. That is what we have to run through to develop a successful AI implementation and machine learning implementation. When you look at the next slide, there's one example from a hotel chain based in UK, where we have implemented an AI-assisted planning with our AI-assisted planning, an amazing forecast results. So what we have implemented is we have target measures like forecasting revenue and book rooms. We have a prediction range of a forecast for the next 4 months, and the granularity was on daily basis. And then what we have also done is that we have used not only internal data and internal drivers, also external drivers like events, like same day last year, etc. So, but what's very important for the hotel chain was that we could include external drivers like events. You'll see that we are using multiple drivers for multivariate analysis, and then we have provided the results in a very detailed level. Prediction for 10 hotels, 6 markets, 6 booking sources, in total 360 combinations, and the automation was always on. A weekly AI planning instead of bi-weekly and monthly, and the accuracy rate was at the end over 95% versus actual and better than human planners, which you can see on the last and final slide, that you don't have to be worried about AI. AI accuracy can be even better than the forecast accuracy of the people who are doing that manually. But like I said, it's very important that you're running that process in parallel for a little bit of time. We heard that from Vibe already, so that people believe in what they are seeing from the AI machine learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for this presentation. And what I specifically want to point out from your presentation is mentioning various sorts of inputs and drivers. Certainly, we cannot possibly build our forecast using only internal data. Thank you for bringing in external drivers as well. And actually, based on the questions we are receiving, we see that inputs interest us a lot. So that's something we'll certainly come back to in our Q&A session. Now it's time for me to ask our audience a question that will be the last polling question for tonight, and it is certainly related to your plans. Do you plan to use artificial intelligence or machine learning anytime soon? And options are: we already have it, we plan to do it within a year, we plan to do it at some point, but not so soon, and we are not considering it at all. That's something that interests me a lot. Where do we stand in terms of implementing modern technologies? Do we have it already? Are we planning to implement it very soon, within 1 year? Are we planning to implement it at some point, or we are not considering it at all? Obviously, this webinar attracts certain type of audience, so I really hope that some of more positive answers will be leading. Let's see how you have voted. I'll give you a minute or so, and eventually I'll close these polling results. Last votes are coming in, and let me close this poll and share the results with you. What do we see here? That 46% of you have mentioned that at some point you are planning to do that. Another 33 are planning to do it already within 1 year. 17 are not considering it at all, and 4% already have it. Andres, what do you think? Is it in line with your expectations?
That is exactly in line with my expectations. Just one comment on that. When I started 28 years ago in EPM, in the area of EPM, then more than 90% of the customers still used Excel for their budgeting planning process. It's still more than 80%. So the point is that there's still more than 80% are still in the first maturity level when we talked about that, and they have other problems. They need to have this integration and getting more efficient. And when we are talking with these prospects and customers, that is the first thing they want to go through. Then they are, of course, thinking about AI, and AI was always part of the discussion, I must say, in each and every single discussion we have. But depending on where the customers are, that might be a little bit later. So 1 year is a good approach, I would say. Like I said, most of the customer have to solve other issues at the beginning.
Right, certainly makes sense. And now let's move on to the next and the last discussion question for today's session is, how can we practically approach transition from traditional planning, budgeting, and forecasting to these modern technologies? So what are practical steps or one tip of advice, if you all can think of that? Let me start with you, Vibe. How we can practically approach this transition?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to repeat what I said earlier, right? Tone from the top, efficiencies. I think when you want to make this transition, you should ask yourself why you're doing this. And once you have determined for yourself why you want to do this, then you should find the operational excellence to execute on it. And the reason why I'm saying this question, because actually to the earlier question that you asked in the poll, right, whether you are considering IA, machine learning, yes, nay, or you already have it, I think same as this, there is not right answer to it, right? Because there might also be instances not to do it. And I would also not want people to start using it because everybody uses it, right? So I think ask yourself as a company why you want to do it, what you want to gain for it, and then you need to think about the practically approach to the transition. But you know, if you want to do it, it has to do also a lot with skilling and training, and make sure that you have the right skill sets with your employees, that they're able to facilitate it, but more important, they're able to support it once it has landed, right? So tone from the top, skill set changes, and ask yourself why you want to do it. Actually, the other way around. Then it's
certainly makes sense. Thank you so much, Vibe. And starting with why is a good recipe for almost every change you want to start. Let me move on to you, Giselda. What do you think? How we can practically approach this transition?
So I think, just adding on my colleagues, the sponsorship is very important. I think another thing that we have learned is that by starting small, you can actually win the trust of really a respected number of professionals within the company, and that they, being the pioneers, can actually become the voiceover of the value that machine learning can bring in your company. So suddenly it becomes like this mirroring effect on understanding the what we are delivering, why we want to implement. I think the other thing that I would urge the businesses to think about is that the opportunity that machine learning brings in creating efficiency in the financial forecasting, it really liberates them or creates a mind space to think about other activities that can be activities that face the customer, activities that actually lead to cost savings and revenue generation. And if they want to do that, then perhaps machine learning with the right data governance processes in place is a way to do it. But starting small, being optimistic, and embracing innovation, I think, are some of the things that the companies need to do for the future to get the most of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this input. To you, Muhammad, what do you think? How we can practically approach this transition?
Yeah, I think already as our fellow panelists mentioned, like it's when we talk about digital transformation, by leveraging AI or ML, it's not only about the technology, but it's also about the mindset, people, process, data structures, as Andrew already gave a very good insights on data. So these are all the enablers. I think it's not only about the technology that we bring the world's best technology, but if you are not skilling the people, or you have insufficient people, or if you don't have the right processes, if you don't have the right data structures, obviously it's not going to work. It's not going to bring any benefit to the organization. And according to Gartner, more than 70% of the finance transformation project fails to bring the forecast benefit to the business, according to their research done at a global level. So that's why I think we need to consider all the parameters, and also we should consider the first thing we have to keep in mind is about the business. What the business needs? What are the key business priorities? What is the number one anxiety in the business? How these technologies can solve our business problems? So we should not only start with the finance, okay, how it can bring efficiencies in the finance, but also how it can help us to solve the real business problems, the challenges that they are facing. It all depends. As the poll mentioned, like somebody is considering it, somebody is planning to do it next year, within a year. So it all depends upon the business, of course, what their business needs. Then only we can get the buy-in also, obviously, from the top management if there is a need in the businesses.
Great. Great. Thank you so much for this answer. And Andreas, back to you. What do you think? How we can practically approach this transition? Even though you have described many steps, but if you want to give one practical advice, what would that be?
I think over the last 20 years, we have seen a lot of transitions in the FP&A area. So we have the top down, then we have top down, bottom up, then we have FP&A going to XP&A. Technologies are coming in. First of all, everybody worked with Excel, then everybody is now start working with enterprise performance management platforms or products, and then now they are moving into AI and ML. There's a simple reason for that, because we have so much data outside in the world which we need to analyze, which is not possible anymore with the previous technologies or the previous methods. So I think sponsorship and the openness from top down, from the top to transition the planning, budgeting, forecasting, always with new approaches, always to learn something new, etc., and bring that and make that available for the company, only to improve, to get more revenue, to save costs, etc., I think is very important. So learning, training, and what Giselda already said, think big, start small, deliver quickly. That is, I think, also something important, but it's a journey. It's a journey.
Great, great. Thank you for all of your answers. And we don't have that much time left, so I suggest we answer at least some of the questions from our audience. We have many of them. Dear audience, don't get worried. If your question is not answered, we will try to answer it in writing afterwards. And let me start now with you, Vibe. Your model and your example have raised many questions. It looks like people are inspired by that. And a series of questions is related to input data. How many years of historical data you need? What other inputs are you using? If you can unveil it a bit for us.
Yeah, I think the main question is, and a difference by business, I would say, right? For example, if you have a very volatile business, I think the length of the period of data that you put in there is probably less relevant than when you have a more stable business, right? So I think if you look to our internals, it's probably somewhere between 3 and 7 years of historical data that we've put in there. But I think it also has to do with, you know, the breadth of KPIs that you put in there. So your the second part of the question was like, which KPIs did you put in there, right? I think I mentioned some of them already during my talk. And again, there it's all depending, you know, on the business that you're trying to forecast. But, you know, if you look to the Microsoft world, you know, one of our key generating streams of income is, let's say, the recurring businesses, right? So our existing customer base, they're going to renew the businesses. And then, for example, what you add to that is like, you know, historically, what do people sell? No, sorry, let me rephrase it. What do people buy that already have this product, right? And then, you know, those kind of things, step by step, you take it further down. And then, you know, that is for the larger customers. And then when you go to the smaller customers, you also look at the economic trends. What is the outlook of the trend? What is the outlook of the economy, right? You know, what is the unemployment rate? What is the expected PC shipments? All those kind of things. It's depending on the different industry that you're in. But, you know, I think most of the people know themselves best, you know, what determines the fluctuations in their outlook. So I think that is what they should use.
Thank you for this answer. And let me ask you, Giselda, a question from the audience. The question is, how do you deal with black swan events in your forecast? So such a huge external events, unexpected, such a COVID pandemic, closures, Ukraine war. Does machine learning give you accurate enough results in these cases, or you need to interfere?
Yeah, very, very good question. So in our case, we have the luxury of having data in which those black swan events have occurred. And therefore, if we want to analyze, for example, how the global pandemic has affected our historical data, ideally when the models are trained, we input these events as part of the historical past. And therefore, in a scenario-based planning approach, in the event of a different pandemic, we would then tailor that event as part of the modeling. In this specific example, how we have done that, we have had the closure of our Vodafone stores. So the reopening of the lockdown periods is sort of an element that you can very much capture in your data. And the other thing that we have seen an effect is obviously on the roaming and therefore border controls. Again, something that you can very clearly model in your data. Yeah, but you have to understand how that black swan event actually affect the data, and then try to see how that you can capture that in your historical past.
Perfect, that's great answer. So not black swan event as such, but its effect on your key inputs you're using. That's something that can be certainly captured. Let me move on to you, Muhammad. I have quite a tricky question for you. I really have no clue how to answer that myself, so hopefully you can manage. And the question is, for companies entering new markets without acquisitions from scratch, is it possible to use artificial intelligence and machine learning for revenue projections?
Yeah, actually it depends, because we are also involved. I also worked on some M&A projects in my experience. It all depends. For example, if you are going to acquire a company, and then of course it is a very different debate that even in an M&A you have to sign the NDA, and when you have the deal closure, so of course you get the access to their data. So of course, as long as the data is available, of course you can use the machine learning and artificial intelligence, because you just have to connect with the data source, and it will do all the algorithms or the arithmetics, all the correlations. So for sure, yeah, if you have the access to data, it all depends, like at what stage of the M&A or the acquisition deal you are at. So if you have the access to data,
not an acquisition, if it's really from scratch, if you don't have historic data, can you still model something on inputs and outputs, or without historical data it's impossible?
Without historical data, of course, you can use the market data. For example, if you are acquiring in a particular industry, for example, any company in a high-tech company or any other company. So of course, there are lots of market data is available that you can use to, of course, analyze it. So it all depends upon the, obviously we need the data to use to generate all the insights and the correlations. So it all depends. If the data is available, even it's internal data, or if it's the external market data, it's available. So for sure, you can use it, and you can generate some insights and do some predictions using the AI.
Yes, that's certainly a good idea. If not company data, industry or market data can be a good starting point. Thank you for this answer. And let me get to you, Andres. I have an interesting question since you have many years of experience in various industries. The question is machine learning more accurate in some industries compared to others? So are there any industries you would specifically recommend it? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So I don't think that is a valid assumption that it's more accurate in some business or in some industries than in others. We have done several projects across all kind of industries, from retailer over hotel chains, over pharmaceutical, over other service industry, etc. As long as you have the access to the data available, you can create a lot of accuracy, and that is not dependent on the industry.
Right, right. Thank you so much for this answer. And I have one question for all of our participants tonight. We've been speaking a lot about upskilling our FP&A teams. We certainly know which types of skills we want to develop there. But what about our top management? Do we really need some change in their skills related to adoption of new technologies? So if you have to name one skill for top leadership related to artificial intelligence or machine learning, what would that be? And let me randomly start with you, Giselda. What is your thinking?
Well, it's a tough question, to be fair. I do believe that you know, throughout the skills that a person needs to have, especially when you work in any business or in corporates, you need to be a data savvy. And I think what we want from our leadership is to be able to embrace the innovation and then get that spirit of trust in mid-management or head of departments. To be fair, in our organization, we have opted that every time that we have a particular capability being developed, there is a sort of induction training within that capability. You most likely have heard about latest collaboration with Google, and therefore, I think the introduction to the new technology and capability is a must. However, expecting a group CFO or a group financial controller to be very close technically to what is being delivered, I think it's a bit too much to ask.
Right, right. So data savviness is one skill. And Muhammad, what's your thinking? I would like a very brief answer. One skill for top management.
You then mentioned a tough question. And I believe it's more of a mindset than the skill set, because, you know, in order to get the buy-in from the top management, obviously the mindset of the top management should be aligned with the finance team or those who are working in the operations. So in my view, it's not, obviously a skill set is, of course, they already, always everyone, even if they're at the senior level, they need to up a skill, they need to polish their leadership skills, of course, but I believe it's more of a mindset than a skill set, I would say.
Oh, that's a great thought. Thank you for saying it out loud. It's a lot about mindset. Coming to you, Andres, what do you think the key skill for top management would be?
I would love that they are curious. So I would vote for curiosity.
Well, that's a great answer indeed. Without curiosity, probably we would not implement anything. Thank you for this great answer. And back to you, Vibe. What do you think one key skill for top management related to implementation of new technologies?
I think this is the toughest question of the afternoon, right? So thanks that I had these leaders in front of me that can help prepare the answer. But to be really quick, right, I think, like Mohamed was saying, I'm not sure if it's a skill set, but it has to believe that technology transformation will be in the interest of the company, the partners, and the customers, right? And that is a mindset change that they have to believe in. And, you know, they need to message that down further into the organization. So not sure if it's a skill set. I think it's more a mindset.
Mindset. On this optimistic note, I think it's time for us to eventually close. Please stay with me here on the camera. I just want to share a bit of useful information for our audience. My dear participants, we would like to invite you to next upcoming events with FP&A Trends. It is our webinar on managing high growth with dynamic forecasting at Dollar General. It's on October 5th. And another one, again, FP&A Trends webinar about FP&A integration, the winning formula of harmonizing top-down and bottom-up planning processes on October 19th. So certainly stay with us for these interesting events. It's time for me to thank again our sponsor for tonight. It is Jedox Modern Enterprise Performance Management. There are certainly many ways for you to connect with us. We are on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter. So certainly do so. We will be happy to see you as a part of our community. Now, big thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for sharing your stories, your case studies, your pieces of advice with us tonight. Thank you for everyone who has joined here in person. Thank you for everyone who will be watching the recording afterwards. And one big ask to you, please don't leave without filling very short survey at the end. Leaving your feedback is important, and we'll certainly try to improve based on that. Have a good night, everyone, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.